The world holds many types of bees, but none are more sought after than scarlet bees. These bees get their name from the color of their bodies, which are bright red with a tinge of orange added into the mix. Besides their color, they are easily recognizable by the honey they produce. Black honey is smoother than ordinary honey. It oozes like fresh oil from the ground and tastes sweeter than sugar. It's also the only honey with the equivalent nutritional value of eating a serving of meats and greens. This miraculous carbohydrate is at peak desirability. All across the globe, people are utilizing black honey as a substitute in their diets. With beef, chicken, vegetables, and many other consumables rising in price, black honey is the cheapest alternative that still allows the average person to feel like they're eating a treat. This is why major corporations are thriving. Their ability to mass produce aids them in keeping up with supply and demand. Not only are corporations able to meet the higher demand, but they can afford to lose bees for their secondary product. Scarlet bees' bodies provide a healthy amount of protein, especially when mixed with the black honey they produce. Lonza Natural Inc. became the first to produce scarlet bars. This gave them a huge jump in the market and made them the leading producer. Dustin would prefer working at Lonza Natural Inc. Instead, he's an employer at a lower-level factory. Nature's Golden Gift is another corporation involved with the mass production of black honey. They're not big like their competitors, but remain in the game due to their cheaper prices. With more of the world relying on black honey for sustenance, affordability is a major draw to the general populace. Of course, NGG cuts costs through poor quality control, but the average consumer overlooks this when they need to put food on the table. The conditions at the factory are why Dustin sought work there. NGG advertised that any faulty batches of black honey are free for the workers to take home. He gets a paycheck and there are enough rancid batches that he can utilize his pay purely for what his family needs. His wife, Lucinda, organizes the black honey for the family. She is the one who categorizes the jars by date and is the rationer. The honey is different from their common bee counterparts. Whereas common honey will never expire, black honey has a shelf life of 19 weeks if kept unopened. Once you break the airtight seal, it'll only last 4 days. With 3 kids, Dustin's father, Lucinda's 3 brothers with their wives, and Dustin's sister with her husband all living together, it's a wonder how his wife can keep everyone fed until he can bring home the next batch of honey. All of them work. Lucinda's brothers work in waste management, which includes sewer maintenance and garbage collection. The women work stocking shelves at whatever store will have them, and Dustin's father stays at home to watch the children since he's too old to do much labor anymore. Those who work all get paid on Friday, and they give their checks to Lucinda, who handles the finances. Their money gets used up despite their combined income. They're left with only $1 each week, which they put away into their secret hole in case of an emergency. That's why Dustin's job is so important to the family, and why it scares him so much to think he'll lose it if he gets caught stealing. Scarlet bees are in the wild, but they are deep, deep down in the earth. They make their hives in open pockets of earth where flowers with roots that stretch to the surface of our planet grow. These special underground flowers are in the Rhizonthala family. Scientists have no information on how the bees and flowers live symbiotically, but they understand that they thrive together. It's impossible to breed the flower, nor can you remove it from the open pockets, otherwise they wither away. The bees, on the other hand, adapt quickly to the flowers on the surface, although the honey isn't as potent. Still, it's enough to keep a person fed. It's just a matter of digging out the hives and moving them to facilities. The process itself is immensely expensive. This means a commoner like Dustin can't claim a hive on his own from nature, but instead he has to rely on taking one from the factory he works at. His daily routine is waking up at 2 a.m, showering, changing into his uniform, eating 5 ounces of black honey, and then heading to work. He'll clock in at 2:45 a.m. before taking his spot in line for the workers. NGG is made up of 3 floors. The top level is ground level, and the other 2 are below ground. It took trial and error for companies and private owners to realize that scarlet bees can only thrive in darkness. Any sort of exposure to sunlight that is more than a minute causes the bees to have a chemical reaction within their bodies which is fatal. It became the consensus that the bees be kept underground where sunlight had a 0 chance of reaching them. The line Dustin is in goes to the 3rd floor where the bees are kept. NGG didn't install light sources for fear that the bees would be affected even only marginally. Instead, the company invested in night vision headgear. It's coupled with a plastic band that is attached to a strap that goes around the worker's neck. Dustin is part of the group that inspects each hive for dying bees before they start the honey collection process. Scarlet bees have a lifespan of 40 days. When they get too old, they can't fly around and are instead forced to cling onto their hives until they eventually die and fall off. Dustin picks the older bees before this happens. It's easy to spot older ones because as they age, their vibrant color turns a dull gray. He has to scan over the hive and check on every bee that crawls. Scarlet bees regularly crawl over their hive without being old, so spotting the difference in color helps immensely. He can tell which bees have more life to give and which are a little past their halfway point. There are also injured bees to keep an eye out for. Injured bees are less productive, which means they have to go. Once Dustin spots an older bee or injured bee, he'll take his company-provided tweezers and grab the tiny insects. He squeezes them with the tweezers until they die and then deposits them into the plastic bin. Of course, this disturbance causes the bees of that hive to investigate. They will come out, not in an entire swarm, it's more of a survey party. Dustin will keep working as they check to see if he's a threat. After a while, they'll get used to the slight jostle from Dustin's prodding and leave him alone. Each hive is attached to an artificial stalactite. Workers will focus on one hive at a time, filling their plastic bins to the brim before dropping their load off into larger bins that are on the opposite side of the wall. It takes them the whole morning to collect the bees. They're then given a 15-minute lunch break, which is divided into two, allowing the workers to do two things: empty their urine bag and eat their lunch. Men are the only ones hired to work the lower levels. This is due to the strict time management policies the company has. The uniforms the employees wear have a built-in catheter that allows for mobility without issue. Catheters were the company's solution for restroom breaks, which in their opinion wasted time. So before Dustin can eat, he empties his full urine bag inside the restroom. Then he'll sit at an empty spot in the employee lounge where he'll pull out a bee hun bar, his employee's version of a scarlet bar, and consume it rapidly. The restroom process takes about 10 minutes, eating 1 minute, leaving him 4 minutes to close his eyes and rest. The bees don't attack during the morning routine because they feel no fear as the workers comb through their old, weak, and dying. That's the morning routine, but then comes the rest of the day. Dustin's team is also the collector of the black honey. Since the bees aren't in hive boxes like normal bees, their honey has to be harvested differently. He's given a bag with numerous large, empty syringes to use. He'll put the long needle into the base of the hive and slowly pull back on the plunger. As he's extracting the honey, the bees get very hostile. It doesn't matter how gently he goes about it. The bees know or have some sort of sense that tells them someone is stealing their honey. The syringe doesn't even cause damage to the hive, and it isn't all that intrusive, yet the bees take defensive measures. A unique thing about scarlet bees is that they don't attack random parts of the body. These bees zone in on Dustin's hands as the true source looting their honey. NGG provides workman's gloves. They are slender to allow flexibility, but are layered enough that the bees can't penetrate the cloth with their stingers. Of course, they aren't fail-proof. All workers know to tuck their uniform sleeves into their gloves, yet at least one scarlet bee will always manage to crawl their way in and sting them. Dustin has been stung numerous times, and it never gets any easier. A scarlet bee's sting can cause up to 75 minutes of agonizing, fiery pain, and they are similar to wasps when it comes to their stinger. The bees won't lose them, and they will stab again and again until the threat is neutralized. Coupled with the intense itching sensation around the sting area, it takes every ounce of Dustin's self-control to keep working. NGG allows full-time workers to take sick time to recover from the bee stings, but it's non-paid. Dustin's family can't afford to lose out on a single paycheck, so he'll grit his teeth and continue extracting the dark liquid. After all the black honey is extracted from the hive and his syringes are full, Dustin will take them to one of the many automated dumbwaiters. From there, the filled syringes will go on to the next floor, which is the production floor. Afterward, it's straight to the packaging and shipping department, which is on the ground floor. Dustin will work until 8 in the evening. He'll have extracted 120 pounds of honey in a single day. Given scarlet bees are quicker in production and the factory has too many hives for Dustin to count, he'll extract 120 pounds more the following day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Dustin doesn't want to be old and still working as a simple employee of NGG. He loathes the very thought that his family will continue their struggle, that his children will grow only to assume the work of their parents. He wants to give them something more. He wants them to never know fruitless labor, to never know the fear of money running out. That's why he needs to be successful in his thieving. He's heading home now. Walking to and from work is how Dustin gets around. Cars are too expensive to buy, even beaten up ones, and gas prices are equivalent to selling a limb or two. Overall, he doesn't mind the commute. It's during his travels home that he gets to check on his latest stowaway. It was months ago that Dustin utilized his time in a bathroom to alter his gloves. His plan came into bloom when he saw the bees crawling all around his gloves, trying to find an entrance so they could sting him for taking their honey. It occurred to him to cut a slit into his gloves near his pointer finger. He cut the top layer of the fabric, leaving the second layer to protect himself. He had put back on the glove and waited out his lunch break to immediately get to work. This cost him time to empty his earring bag, but when he felt a bee crawling around within the glove, he didn't care. Since then, he's been taking bees with him every day. On his walks home, he checks in on the little insects, which he starts doing now. Dustin doesn't stop, but slows his pace as he says the same prayer he's always said. God, let it be this time I get it right. It takes a bit of finagling with his gloves before the bee finally tumbles out. It's dead. Dustin rolls the bug around. He rubs it with his fingers to get it to move, but nothing happens. It's not coming back. This always happens despite all the preventive measures he takes. When he feels a bee in his glove, he'll start working one-handed to ensure he doesn't squash it. The glove is also enough to keep away sunlight, not to mention by the time he gets out, it's already dark outside, so when he peeks at the creature, they aren't in any danger. Still, none of it seems to matter because they always wind up dead at the end of the day. No matter what he does, he can never get it right. This makes Dustin angry because how many times has he attempted the same scheme? How many times has he prayed that he would finally bring at least one bee home? He tosses the bee to the ground and stomps its tiny body with his foot. Its intestines splatter across the pavement. He brings his foot up only to smash it down again, repeating the process over and over until there isn't anything left that resembles a scarlet bee. Dustin draws in a shaky breath before continuing his journey home. "How was work, love?" Lucinda greeted him as he walked through the front door. He peered at her, a deep frown setting in. Their house is a single story with 2 bedrooms, 1 full bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. As you walk through the front door, you're greeted with the living room, and directly to the right is the kitchen. Past the living room, down the hallway, is where the bedrooms are, with the only bathroom being inside the master bedroom. It's a small home. Dustin and Lucinda share the master bedroom with their kids. Dustin's father sleeps in the second bedroom, with everyone else claiming the living room at night. Currently, Lucinda and her sisters-in-law are setting up the eating linen. Since the kitchen and living room aren't blocked from each other, this allows for a bigger floor area. The family hadn't bothered with furniture for the whole house except in Dustin's father's bedroom, where the old man had a mattress and bed frame. The way they sleep is bundled in blankets, and the way they eat is atop a spread-out linen sheet that was once pure white, but now is yellow with age. The women spread the linen from the kitchen to the living room. They'll then set out everyone's honey rations for the day. Dinner is supposed to be a time for socializing. Since everyone is always busy working, this is the only time they get to catch up with each other. It helps strengthen their family bond, which gets tested each day. The only way they can all survive is by working together, and therein lies the issue. Dustin doesn't want to just survive. He wants to live. How pitiful it is that his family gathers to only eat the black honey his job gave him. Other people, more successful people, get to eat roasted poultry for dinner. They'll have sides to eat with their main dish and drink something else that isn't just water flavored with honey. Now, Dustin has never tasted chicken, nor has he ever had the fortune of smelling it, but he knows it's better than the honey they're about to eat. "Dustin!" Lucinda calls out once more. By this time, everyone else is already gathering together. His children come barreling through the hallway leading from the bedrooms. The youngest, Sweet Billy, launches herself over the eating linen. Dustin acts on instinct as he grabs her before she can tumble to the hardwood floor. "Daddy, Daddy, I caught an orange butterfly," she squealed in child exuberance. "Help me pin it, please." The oppressive dissatisfaction seeps away as Dustin holds his daughter. He squeezes her in a tight hug, to which she doesn't complain. Billy will only hug back with as much force. After dinner, okay? Billy smiles and nods her head. She squirms away out of her father's arms to go sit with her brother and sister. Dustin takes a moment to gather himself before joining his family on the floor. Dinner talk is about everything and anything. They start with the usual, how was work? Bit with everyone saying the same thing they always do. Work was rough, but it feels good to be at home. Then they'll switch to whatever nonsense they come across. Like who managed to win some money off a scratch ticket, which neighboring family's moving, what old story Grandpa came up with today, and so on. Dustin is choosing to remain quiet this time around. Although Billy helped to alleviate some of his sour mood, he couldn't completely ignore the fact that another bee died. His family doesn't know anything about what he's trying to do. Dustin didn't want to divulge his plans to them in case they never reached fruition. There wasn't any point in getting their hopes up. After dinner, everyone helped to clean. Once Dustin put away the linen, he called to Billy. "Where's the butterfly you mentioned?" he asked. She grabbed his hand and pulled on it. Dustin allowed himself to be dragged by his daughter. He followed her to the back door. They don't have a backyard. Instead, they have a back alley that is cluttered with garbage and green patches where grass has managed to break through the concrete barrier. To the very right of the back door is a patch where Lucinda and Billy have nourished the greenery in an attempt to create a garden. It's a sad garden no bigger than a foot wide, but the mother and daughter have kept it flourishing with at least 2 flowers. Now there is an addition. A glass jar sits next to the garden, and inside Dustin can see the butterfly Billy is speaking of. "It was flying around our garden, Daddy. Mama says more will come, so we can have more tide," Billy said enthusiastically. Dustin gave her a half smile because this is another thing like the bees. Dustin loves the color of butterflies. They are radiant, and the way the creatures move is in a delicate fashion that is just captivating. Dustin's father used to do a trick where he would tie a thin piece of string to the creatures so Dustin could keep them as a pet until they eventually died. His father showed him his ways, which is to get a needle and stick a hole through a wing of the insect, and that's where the string would go through. Once you pull the string through, you have to tie it to the other half in a lasso fashion so that when the butterfly flies far enough, it will tighten the string on itself. He wants to tether butterflies for his daughter because she shares the same fascination. When he first explained the concept, her face glowed in excitement. The thought that she could keep butterflies as her pet encouraged her to capture as many as possible. In reality, butterflies rarely flew through their alleyway, so it's only been a handful of times that she's managed to run to Dustin with a newly captured butterfly. Unfortunately for her, Dustin always failed in attempts to prick the wing. Every attempt he's made so far has ended with the butterfly falling apart under his hands. He'll rip the wing apart when trying to hold it still, or he'll squash the insect due to the unnecessary pressure he puts on it. When any of these events occur, Billy will frown, which causes Dustin's heart to ache. But then the girl will hug her daddy and tell him that maybe, next time, they'll get it right. He's not sure why, but it hurts him more when his daughter keeps a positive attitude. Billy is such a happy star amongst the clutter that is the life she was born into. Dustin doesn't see himself as deserving to be called Billy's father, yet he is. Hopefully he'll get this one right. "Let's take this inside. It's getting dark, and the streetlights out here don't help much in letting this old man see," Dustin told her. They went back into the main area of the house, which is illuminated by candles. Their household, like many others, turns off their lights after dinner. Dustin chooses to head to the kitchen because the kitchen window, above the sink, faces the street outside, which allows the street light to funnel through. There is a candle on the counter next to the sink, and Dustin moves it closer to provide him with even more light. "Here, Daddy," Billy says. She has taken it upon herself to fetch him a needle and thread, which she promptly handed over. He thanks her with a smile before focusing on the task at hand. Dustin first expertly takes the butterfly out of the jar. The initial start never gives him problems, so he doesn't allow it to give him false hope. It's when he has to place the butterfly on the counter that his hands begin to shake. It's not if he's a surgeon operating on a patient, but it feels just as important. He pins the insect with 2 fingers by placing his fingers on the wings. The butterfly is flattened out before him, so Dustin takes the needle and jabs it in one of the wings. It didn't occur to him that with such a tiny creature, his fingers have no space between them. It's inevitable when his opposite hand collides with the other. His eyes follow the tear that forms on the butterfly's wing. It starts from the outer edge, then it zigzags, heading for the thorax. Such a beautiful creature, and Dustin managed to destroy it in seconds. He never gets it right. "Daddy, no!" Billy yelped when he gathered the remains in a single fist and discarded them atop the lit candle. The bug bits instantly catch fire. Dustin inhales the scent of the burning butterfly, which is rather putrid. He watches every piece get consumed by the flames. It's only then that he registers the sniffles of his daughter. "Go get ready for bed, Billy," Dustin commands without glancing her away. He would think she'd be used to this by now, because it always ends this way. Billy scampers away from her father in a flurry of agitation. She'll be fine, he knows. Lucinda will comfort their daughter, and soon enough, Billy will fall asleep. In the morning, the events of the night will seem distant to her. Her positive demeanor will help reset her to factory settings. Dustin supposes it's a coping mechanism of hers. It's why she's always so happy. He doesn't needle with it by talking to her about the subject. It's his thought she'll need a way to defend herself mentally against the bitter world he's unable to take her out of. If he can't manage to string a butterfly, then what hope does he have of bringing back a scarlet bee? Dustin blows out the kitchen candle and heads off to bed. The morning comes too early for his liking. His legs feel heavier as he walks to the factory. It's almost as if someone put lead in them as he slept. Every step he takes is like trudging through thick mud, and he can't understand why. He's done this same routine since he was 13 years old. Every day he woke up early, got himself ready, and headed straight to work. Today, though, it's like a battle he can't get himself excited about winning. Dustin slows his steps until he just stops walking altogether. Honestly, what is the point? He'll get to work and then what? Work another 17-hour shift? It's not like it ends. Dustin works every single day. There's no holiday leave, no sick time, no weekends, no nothing. He's trapped in a vicious cycle, one that if he breaks it, will put his whole family at risk. His children and wife need him as their provider. Without Dustin, the order gets thrown askew and he can't do that to them. He loves his family so much it hurts to think about failing them. Dustin is already by not being able to bring back a single bee. Just one bee would give him much needed hope that things will get better, but he never gets right. "Why?" he shouts into the air. He balls his hands into fists and collapses forward on his knees. The force of the impact is so great that it causes him to yell once more, only this time from the pain. It doesn't matter though. Dustin just stays kneeling there on the ground. No tears fall from his eyes, but they sting nonetheless. It takes him a moment to steady his breath before he can stand up. He has to keep trying. He can't stop, not until he's got what he needs. Dustin resumes walking to the factory. He's aiming for a different tactic this time. It's always been that Dustin waits until he's on his way home to check on any captive bee. This time around, he's going to capture one before his lunch break. It's a simple enough task. All he has to do is aggravate the bees. He won't have access to syringes given the time of day, but he can physically poke a finger through the hive. This is something he doubts anyone has done before, and he's not sure how much attention it will bring to him. The structural integrity of a scarlet hive is rather weak. The bees can make them well enough so they don't fall, but they don't spend much time fortifying them. The intrusion will show them he's a threat to their safety, so they're bound to crawl all over his hands just in time for lunch. Dustin is thinking that he can cut a piece of tubing from his catheter so he can use it as a breathing tube for the bee. They're too bulbous to fit through the narrow tubing, which means he doesn't have to worry about potential escape. The only thing that will be flowing through the tube is air. It never occurred to him that the reason his bees keep dying is because they aren't getting enough oxygen. The gloves could be cutting off airflow, so this is his way around the issue. It's going to leave him in a predicament since he won't be able to pee. Many of the workers will have moments where they urinate on themselves due to a full urine bag. These workers are the type to forego emptying their bags in favor of napping their time away. Dustin can't blame them, especially since it's the older folk that do this, but he never wanted to join their lot. To him, it's rather demeaning, yet he'll have to take the risk if he wants to succeed. Depending on how this operation goes, Dustin may have found a new way to get his bees home, a way that works. He prays that this time he gets it right. Dustin casts fleeting glances to his left and right. His co-workers are too engrossed in the work to pay him any attention. They don't see when he uses his tweezers to press into the side of the beehive. Since the tweezers are made of metal, they help him dig a hole big enough for his finger to plunge inside up to the knuckle. The instant he breaches the hive, the bees become rustled, and there is a dangerous buzz as they go for the intruding appendage. He can feel when the insects are crawling in the slit he made. Dustin's heart rate increases with excitement. He feels as though two have gotten inside the slit, which has never happened before. Such luck caused Dustin to be hasty in removing his finger, and that's when he noticed his problem. The finger can't fit through the hole because of the bulbous bees. Trying to fit his finger through is pushing the bees back. He needs to make the hole bigger. Dustin forgoes being inconspicuous and uses his other hand to tear off pieces of the hive to make the hole bigger. His menstruations aren't gentle as he would like, but the gloves don't give him much grip when digging into the hive. He's jostling it too much. There has been many regrets in Dustin's life. He regrets getting married despite loving his wife and having children, although Billy is his world, and he regrets being born because then he'd never have to face the failure he is. At the moment, all those regrets pale in comparison when he sees the hive fall. It had been unable to handle Dustin's mistreatment. The hive crashes onto the floor, spreading its contents everywhere. There was this phenomenon only witnessed during the first week of discovering the scarlet bees. A researcher accidentally dislodged a hive from where it was built into a dirt wall. When the hive broke, all the bees of that hive went into a feral state. They began attacking anything that moved, which were the other researchers and neighboring bees. Such an assault roused all the beehives, and the underground cavern became a mess of buzzing insects. The researchers weren't in any danger because of the bee suits they wore, but they hadn't accounted for the bees to escape through the tunnel the researchers had entered the cavern from. By that point, those studying the bees understood to only do their research at night to avoid killing them, so when the bees escaped, they did so under the cover of darkness. That is when the chaos unfolded. Those outside the entrance weren't wearing protective gear, and when the bees came upon them like a plague, they suffered from multiple stings. Typically, one sting from a normal bee will only cause death if a person is allergic to the venom. Otherwise, it takes a plethora of stings to kill someone. The scarlet bee was found to cause no allergic reaction to people. What makes them so deadly is that the pain from their stings puts strain on the heart. It's one thing to have a single scarlet bee sting you as the initial sting uses up their venom store and it takes 24 hours for them to regain it. It's another when thousands penetrate the skin. A single beehive can contain up to 80,000 scarlet bees. That cavern held 16 hives. Many people died that day. There had been a nearby town that suffered monstrous casualties. Their saving grace had been when the sun finally rose, killing the exposed bees. Just like all those years before, the bees that came from the hive Dustin broke were just as feral. Dustin is protected because of his uniform. The headgear is netted, so there's no chance for the bees to get at his face. The ones that have to worry are the other bees. The other workers, who were once absorbed in their duties, become panicked when they see their hives vibrating from the riled bees within. The beehives are being invaded. Such volatile reactions mean that more hives dislodge from their stalactites and crash onto the floor. Despite not being in real danger from the bees, the employees begin to panic at the havoc unfolding before them. NGG has never experienced such an incident as this one in all its years in operation, so there's no practice drill for the workers to lean on. Their only thought is that they must escape the underground confines. All around Dustin, employees headed for the exits as they were being chased by the antagonized bees. It was like a flood of bodies within the stairwells as everyone pushed against each other. Such disregard for order caused some to have their headgear knocked off, exposing them to the assaulting bees. Cries of agonized pain rebounded off the walls, creating a disparaging echo that pushed the workers to be even more desperate for escape. The floor above Dustin's was in a quiet state as everyone worked monotonously. The sounds from the machines masked what was happening below. It's not until the doors to this level burst open that everyone is aware of the disaster that has taken place. Those closest to the doors are the first affected, and it takes little time for the lifeless bodies to drop to the floor. One of the workers further back races to a large red button at the side of the wall. This button is meant for an emergency involving a person losing a limb to one of the machines. The worker pushes it and a resounding alarm begins to blare. The same worker joins the others that head for the exit that would take him to the ground floor. Dustin had stayed behind where the initial hive had broken. Most of the bees left him. Only a few stragglers were buzzing around attempting to sting him. In only a few moments, Dustin had messed everything up. He can hear the alarm signaling an employee was injured, letting him know that the bees are one floor away from the surface. With too many people fighting for their lives, even if someone had thought to lock the doors to the surface, they would have to fight back against the scared masses. The bees will break out, attacking every being in sight. Since it's still early morning, the sun won't rise for another 3 hours. The bees will roam far during that time, and then it hit him. Dustin's commute to work takes him roughly 25 minutes, a mile essentially. Tigangos, the town in the first incident of escaped scarlet bees, had been further than that. Even then, had the sun not come out, the bees were already seen to be moving past that town. The distance seemed to be no bother to them. Those bees will reach his home, his family, once they reach the ground floor. Dustin ran for the stairs. All along the stairwell lay the newly deceased bodies of his co-workers. The bees may have brought down those missing their headgear, but others were still covered, being trampled their cause of death. Dustin doesn't take any more time to digest the carnage before him. He's sprinting up the steps, taking them 2 at a time before reaching the floor above him. Here, the casualties are even higher. The whole floor is bathed in a circling red light, and the siren is louder here. Dustin keeps moving forward to the final exit. NGG, although smaller when compared to its competitors, has a massive facility. They hold hundreds of beehives underground, putting the bee population into hundreds of millions. The swarm that has overtaken the area makes Dustin feel like he's walking through a sea. Still, he pushes forward. His lungs burn and his legs ache, but when he nears his neighborhood, he forgets his discomfort. Dustin doesn't open the front door of his house because he doesn't want to risk the bees getting in. He goes to the side to peer through the kitchen window. The bees are blocking his view, so he presses his face against the glass and cups his hands around the lenses for the headgear. He thought the bees outside were the obstruction, but as he looked into the house, he realized this wasn't what was happening. They had gotten inside. The panic that Dustin kept at bay began to flood him. He didn't think when he rammed his shoulder against the front door. There's a sharp pain from the action, yet that hardly registers. It's worth it when the door is broken off its hinges, allowing entry inside. Walking in, he's greeted with the sight of his family lying lifeless on the ground. Dustin goes over to the first body and sees it's one of his brothers-in-law. He leaves the man and checks the other bodies, not finding his wife or children. In doing this, he walks down the hallway, giving him a clear view of the back door left open. He forgoes the bedrooms. There is a single body just outside the back entrance. Lush red hair is draped messily over the face, but it does little to hide the terrified expression frozen in place. Billy. No, come back to me, baby, Dustin cries out. He stumbles over to the corpse of his daughter, and this riles up the scarlet bees that still crawled over her. Get off! Don't touch her! Dustin yells in anger as he swipes off the insects. He is still stuck in the swarm, and they react just as violently as he is in the way they converge around him. They only fuel the fire within him, and Dustin begins swinging his hands through the swarm of bees. Why? He shouts into the air. I don't get it! He doesn't understand how this could have happened. His family, his wife, his children, sweet Billy. Every single time, Dustin never gets it right.